And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing all right. I'm doing okay. My congestion, and I'm feeling a little sick, which is not the greatest way to start the fall. But maybe it's because the weather's slowly changing, even though it's been hot. It's going to be hot this week. But I apologize to the listeners who have to listen to me sound like I have a mid-February cold. I don't know what this is, but hopefully we'll power through it and get through it. How was your Labor Day, Conor? What were you up to?
Pretty low key. Nothing too crazy. Got caught up on work. It's gonna be busy here now with we got Bruins practices coming up this week. Getting ramped up for that. Was over at a Holy Cross football game on Saturday. Shout out to Holy Cross, the actual good football program in Massachusetts. Unlike those people out in Newton who are gonna lose to Holy Cross this upcoming week.
I
That
can't
program's
wait
an
for that. I
embarrassment.
cannot wait for that, by the way.
Uh, but yeah, other than that, pretty low key, just keeping busy, getting ready. Again, as I said before, August, it's you're ramping up. You're like going up the roller coaster is how it is. It's just you can wear shorts while doing it. Now I'm ready to ramp things up here a little bit.
Yeah, it should be good. Captain's practice today, and then things are gonna only get crazier and more active from there in the centennial season. And it's interesting, at the start of the offseason, we talked a lot about goaltending. With Linus Ullmark potentially being on the trading block, can the Bruins go into next season, or as the 23-24 season with Swayman and Busey, or Swayman and another veteran journeyman? Nothing happened, at least yet, and it doesn't feel like anything is going to happen, at least before the season starts, in net. That's different from last year. It feels like it's going to be Ullmark and Swayman back together again. All signs point to that. And it's interesting because, both were solid last year. I mean, Ullmark won the Vesna. Swayman was, terrific as well. And I think we had the same question last year. And I think my answer was Swayman. But I'm curious, going into this year, after what happened last year, who do you think is going to be better of the two?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because I think the conventional thinking, right, is that I mean, you hope that they're both almost equal, or one of them maybe just slightly better, but it feels like Omar is due to take somewhat of a step back, and that's not an indictment on him or his ability. It's just, usually if you win a Vesna, you don't keep on winning Vesnas over and over again. I think it's kind of the safe situation there. So I think you expect a little bit of
Safe bet.
regression on some of
Safe
this.
bet.
Yeah, safe bet, I would say, right? But again, it's not indictment on him. It's just those are the breaks when you're a goaltender in a very variable position like that, where obviously you have a lot of turnover in front of you. And for Swayman, it's like, all right, can he take another step forward with his skill set? I mean, it's a guy that every year has gotten better and better. Still a young goalie, still improving. Um, you know, am I going to say one way or the other which player can take a step forward? I think if you're the Bruins, you're happy if just you get to a full 55-45 split, and both guys are playing at around the same level. Again, you'll take it if Omar can keep up what he did last year and has a great high danger save percentage, builds you out of a lot of games, you'll take it. But I think you have to just err on the side of not caution, but realism of that you're expecting those numbers to take a step back. But I think it all comes down to whether Swayman can take another step forward. If you can offset some regression in Omar's game with a guy like Swayman building off of what he's shown so far, and maybe that means you know, easier reps for Ullmark, where, I think we saw last year where he's the number one guy and ran into injury issues down the final stretch of the season. Or it could be a situation with Swayman getting, a tougher matchup here or there, where I think the bulk of the playoff matchups or, playoff ready teams in the regular season was usually Ullmark getting the nod there. If you can allocate those workloads a little bit more evenly this year, I think both guys tend to benefit from it. But if I had to say which player could be more improved, I think Swayman has more room to grow, whereas I think Ullmark hit the pinnacle of what you're expecting of just the Vezina winner. I think you can only take a slight step back from that.
Yeah, I mean, Ullmark is starting up here. You don't expect him
Yes.
to. You can't get higher than what he did last year in the regular season. So, by definition, I mean, Swayman, should improve more than Ullmark has to improve. The one area that I would love to see Ullmark get better in, and I don't know, I guess this would only come up if Swayman went down with an injury, is can he string together a lot of good starts over a long period of time. And we've wondered about him with this the last 2 postseasons where he's sort of broken down in the playoffs and sort of needed to be stepped in for. You look at, even during the regular season, even last year, there were not a lot of stretches that he played multiple games in a row. And that's fine. Again, it kind of goes back to like, maybe you should have kept the tandem going in the postseason. But I still think at some point you do want to see Ullmark string together start after start after start after start, if possible. Again, it's hard. You have Swayman there too. He needs starts as well. He needs to improve. So again, I doubt that they go different than they did last year in the regular season in the sense of a tandem. I don't think we'll be seeing a clear 1 and 2 this year unless someone takes a huge step back, which they shouldn't. But again, can you find a way to make that tandem also work when you make the playoffs? Now, this team's focus needs to be making the playoffs first. That's the big thing that has to happen. But, in terms of improvements, I think with Ullmark, with Swayman, and it hits at a bigger point. I think we are all in an agreement on Swayman's probably the starter of the future, right? That's your guy in net. He's 24. We talked about this after he signed that deal about a month ago. You lock him up long-term when you can. But has he officially proved he's a starter of the future yet? Again, you look at, had 41 games in 21-22, 37 games last year. Does he need to play more? Does he not need to somehow find a way to get past Ullmark as the 1A to prove that he can be the starter of the future?
Yeah, I think if you're the Bruins, you're still mapping out the overall game plan of where this team looks 2-3 years down the road. And I think it's a situation where I wouldn't even call Swayman a small sample size, right? He's played, a very heavy amount of games the last couple of years and has looked good. And every year he's gotten better. I think if you're the Bruins, you're in a spot where you now have the luxury of, instead of throwing this guy who's been on this, steady, increase in terms of his reps, responsibilities, and his production between, in net, you're seeing him continue to take those steps forward, but you're also not going to throw him to the wolves, right? Where it's all right, here you go, and by yourself, go, good luck. We have faith in you, but it's on you now. I think if you're the Bruins, it's kind of the luxury of having a spot where you can keep him in this role where, again, if he plays better, he's going to get more reps. It's kind of, Swayman even mapped that out after he signed his contract with the partnership with him and Ullmark, is that, they both know that if they take a step back, the other guy is competitive and he's going to take more reps. So if you're the Bruins and you're still in this environment where you're not, I wouldn't say coddling Swayman for, his future role, you hope, as the number 1 guy, keep him in this spot where he's still averaging 40 starts, 35, 40 starts a season, still playing a key role as one of the 2 anchors, I think, of your success this upcoming year, if you guys are a playoff team, and keep on fighting in that spot and developing. I think that's better than just all of a sudden just anointing him as the number 1 option and just seeing kind of where the dice fall. That could have been an option if they traded Ullmark. Obviously, didn't happen. But the way the Bruins are doing now, it's kind of a spot that I think most teams would like to be. It's like Tuukka Rask, right? Could he have been the guy that you just in 08 you just stuck with him? Said screw it. Well, he looks good. We've seen him a couple of seasons now. Yeah, sure, that could work. But I think you look at the spot he was in, where proven backup in a very good system. Defense had a good guy in front of him, obviously. And if you're Swayman and you can follow that same path in terms, I'm saying that, Swayman is the next Rask, but if you're in that spot where you can develop under those minutes, still play a key role, and then eventually when he's, 26, 27, the role is his. It's unquestioned at that point. He's established himself as a legit NHL player. Seems like the better option for all parties involved.
Yeah, again, the stock ticker on him is pointing up in terms of his career and him being a top goalie in this league. And it's interesting because you look at, we've talked about this before, the amount of young goalies around the NHL who've been thrust into these starting goalie positions at very young ages, and it's very up and down, or just a straight downward trend. And, again, I think it is smart that you have a guy like Ullmark there who takes the bulk of the workload and sort of protects a guy like Swayman and lets him develop at his own pace. Swayman didn't spend much time in Providence. And when he was in Providence, it was the COVID year. They were at New England Sports Center. So he didn't have a lot of time in the AHL, so this still is development for him. So I do think it's very impressive that at this point in his career where he is. And it brings it to this. I don't know if you saw this. So Jay Fresh on Twitter did this offseason fan poll and asked fans, who are the top 10 goalies, who are the top 10, right wings, left wings, centers, left defensemen, and right defensemen. And Ullmark came in 7th, which feels a little low for the reigning Vezina winner, but
I think he was 6th on like NHL networks, the top goalies. I'm like,
well,
NHL
NHL Network's rankings are always a little weird. Like those always seem to be there to kind of just like stoke the fire a bit. But what were you gonna say?
No, I was saying, I think NHL Network had him at like 6th overall. And it's like, all right, I mean, again, he took this one huge step forward, but like was a very solid goalie that put it all together. You would think he would be higher up on the list for the video game numbers he put together, but alas.
At least top 5. I think the NHL Network people kind of go back to I forget the NHL Network rankings, but Hellebuck and Shesterkin and Vasilevsky and like Ottinger and those guys get a little more press, I feel like, than Ullmark. But you're right. I mean, I don't know, like Ullmark should be top 5 at least. But an interesting one is Swayman, and this Jay Fresh poll came in at 9th. Does that feel high? I know it's just a fan poll. This isn't the be all end all, but does that feel high?
I mean, I could see that like Jay Fresh and the numbers he digs into, because I think the one thing that always stuck out, I think Ullmark, I believe, was better than Swayman this year in terms of high danger save percentage. But I feel like that was something that Swayman, even like the last couple of years where he had a more limited role, he was always like top 5 at high danger save percentage. Like he's a guy that always made very timely saves that kind of separated him from the pack of a lot of other very, very good goaltenders. So I think the talent is there, and I think that's probably what I would imagine people lean into, or the potential, I guess, with a guy like Swayman. But 9, you probably have to see him build off of it even more. I mean, hell, if he takes another huge step forward this year, it kind of solidifies him in that role. But again, it's not to say that he's been. I don't think you can make like a sweeping claim on Swayman and the type of NHL player he is right now, other than the fact that he's a very promising goalie that right now, barring any disaster, is on track to being, at the very least, a very solid, proven number 1 goalie up at the NHL level. And you have that in your system. It's all about just building and moving forward.
Just a quick break in the action to tell you about our delicious friends over at HelloFresh. So what is HelloFresh? With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. When it comes to options, honestly, more is more. That's why HelloFresh's menu includes 40 recipes and over 100 add-on items to choose from every week. And guess what? A new season calls for new meals, and HelloFresh has a fresh fall lineup full of delicious dinners and more to choose from. Take your pick from 40 weekly recipes that suit your lifestyle, from veggie to family friendly to fit and wholesome. I recently cooked up the honey butter barbecue pork chops, and my goodness, I was sent everything from the sweet and smoky barbecue seasoning to the green beans, right down to the honey. And within about 30 minutes, I had myself a gourmet meal, and I got to admit, I felt like a chef, which is a very, very cool feeling, and and the food tastes even better when you cook it. So go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/50Bruins and use code 50Bruins for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, I mean, you just think back to few people took that Game 7 loss harder than him in that press conference after. And I think, like, you just look at, you mentioned the promise. Like, I think what happened in Game 7, happening in Game 7, the fact that happened to him so young in his career, is going to have a big impact on him moving forward. But yeah, 9th, I was sort of like, oh, wow. Nationally, I'm surprised that Swayman ranked as high in the top 10. But again, I think, as you said, projecting wise, 9th makes a good amount of sense for Swayman going forward. It's interesting. One thing, moving off of the goaltending, one thing that we have discussed a lot, but we haven't we haven't fully dived into yet. We haven't, gone head first into this. We just kind of keep mentioning it. But the bottom six on this Bruins team is fascinating because, I was writing down my, we're going to construct what we think will be the opening night bottom six. And my guess is neither of us will be correct because a lot's going to change in training camp. A lot is going to change with these guys. But even just right here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You have about 13 guys right now in the running for the bottom six. And I'm probably forgetting a person or, two people. But I want to start with the third line. What would be your projected third line for opening night?
Yeah, I'll preface this by echoing when you said that I feel like it's going to be wrong because I really don't know how to make heads or tails of this until I think we get to the season. Because again, if you ask my opinion, I still would have opted for the stick Frederick up there to see what you have in the top six next to Coyle, and then you have more talent further down. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case to open the year. So we'll go with the assumption of what Montgomery mapped out, right? Of JVR, Zacha, Pasta, Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusk, right? That's the top six he mapped out.
You got it.
All right. So I will go. I'm going to say Morgan Geekie at 3C. I'm also going to keep mine very boring in terms of younger players. I think there's a lot to be excited about. Guys like Merkulov or hell, maybe a guy like Johnny Beecher or something takes a step forward and proves himself in preseason. I'm still going to err on the side of caution that the Bruins and the amount of guys they signed, maybe one or two guys establish themselves. And I think even then you're looking at maybe a guy like Lauko, solidifying his spot in the line as opposed to a guy from Providence fighting for a spot and getting out of preseason and training camp. So my third line, I'm going to go Geekie 3C. I still am high on Geekie in terms of I think what he can do under more minutes. Not to say he's going to be averaging 19 a night, but if you're averaging over 30 points, averaging under 11 minutes a night, bump that up to 13, 14. Not to say he's going to be a 60-point guy, but he's a guy that I think has more to give in an elevated role. I'm going to go Frederick, right wing on the third line. Again, we've talked about Frederick quite a bit. Montgomery maps him out at right wing on that spot. And he has more room to grow as well. When he's on his game as a physical player, guy that almost had 20 goals last year, if he can replicate that or build off of it, he can be a game changer and a guy that drives play on that third line. So it's going to be fascinating to see how he is when he's kind of, completely new surrounding, right? With a guy like Geekie or someone else like that. So have him right wing, and then left wing, I'm going to go with Lauko. I'm really high on Lauko and what he can bring. You look at his skill set, his motor, forechecking, ability to kind of mix things up after the whistle. Maybe he's better suited for the fourth line, but I think when you look at just what he showcased in terms of effort, making stuff happen, drawing penalties, getting 4 goals, 7 points in 21 games, I feel like there's more room to grow there in terms of, even if it's not reflected in the stat line. I don't think if he plays 82 games, he's all of a sudden going to be a 18 goal guy, 38 points or something like that, which you'll take. But I think in terms of just what he brings that isn't reflected on the score sheet in terms of forechecking ability, forcing turnovers, those things. I think if you're looking at carving an identity on the third line, a guy like that whose motor is always running whenever he hops over the boards, I think he's a guy that could be really intriguing in that spot that I think has maybe more of an upside than people think.
Before we continue on with the conversation, I want to tell you about our friends over at Fanduel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now, obviously, is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit fanduel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. Again, bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Again, visit fanduel.com/Boston. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. I hate this because we had the exact same third line. And I'll say this. You know what it is? And people might think we're crazy for this. Frederick and Geeky are locks, I think, for 3 left wing and 3C. So that, I mean, those are I feel like kind of obvious. Lauko, I completely agree with you on. And this is what, so for me, the right side of Geeky on that line came down to Lauko and Lysell for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because Lauko and Lysell are obviously two vastly different players. If you put them together, you'd make a freaking superstar. But with Lysell, you have that high skill, the high potential. You have a guy who, can be a game-changing player, like a real solid game-changing player, a top prospect in your system, which I guess isn't saying much, but still that's, he's a, former first-round pick. But you have that downside of the play away from the puck, the defensive game. He was a minus. I know we're anti-plus minus, but, again, I don't know if the AHL has super in-depth advanced defensive analytics like the NHL does. He was a minus 12 last year. And so again, like way under being a point per game player in Providence. I think he still needs some more seasoning. I don't think there's anything wrong with a little more seasoning on him. You can't, no problem to leave him down there for a bit of time. But the idea of Lysell being on that line would intrigue me if things kind of shape out that way, if he tears it up in Providence or there's injuries at the big league level. But I mean, it's interesting, him being with Geeky and Frederick. I think, he'd kind of add the skill to that line and potentially up the production for someone like Geeky. But I think for how Montgomery is constructing the top 6, with Van Riemsdyk kind of being a surefire bet as a producer in the top 6 and the way that's going to be constructed, I think a guy like Lauko makes more sense, and that you kind of know what you're going to get. He's probably not going to, produce so much he works his way into the top 6, and he's also probably not going to do crazy irresponsible things out there that are going to cost a ton of goals against. The compete's always going to be there. So I think for the way Montgomery's kind of shaping this team to start, that's what I would expect. I would expect kind of going for a guy like Lauko over a guy like Lysell, and Lysell would be more of like a mid-season call-up. If that ends up working itself out. For the fourth line, I went with Lucic on the left. I just think that, I know, the way him coming back, the return, the ovation he'll get opening night, I have a tough time believing he won't be there on that fourth line. I don't think he's necessarily maybe the greatest fit, but I just think given his own circumstances, the leadership component he brings, having been here before, Krejci and Bergeron being gone, I think Lucic makes sense there. I'm curious to see if there's anything more in the tank, like, or is he a guy that gets scratched a lot throughout the season? We'll see. Down the middle, Jesper Boquist. Well, Jesper Boquist, he actually has pretty good numbers the past couple of years. 23 points in 56 games 2 years ago, 21 and 70 last year. That's a guy, again, who I think, could be kind of a surprise. Guy who's a high skill player. I think he was a second round pick, if I'm not mistaken. So again, a guy that, maybe you can get something out of. I don't know his defensive metrics. I don't think they're as great as a guy like Noshik's were, but I still think that it's worth, might be a little more stable than a guy like Beecher being there. And for the way Montgomery's constructing this team, I think that it's absolutely very possible that Boquist starts out there. And then on the right, I think you can get creative with this. This goes along with sort of the Lauko mold. I went with McLaughlin here. I think McLaughlin is as reliable and steady a prospect that you can put in the bottom 6 as you have. And I think he's a guy that you know what you're going to get. He's not a liability out there. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the most skilled guy, but he works hard. He's good in his own end. And I think as a fourth line presence, I think that might be an area. So when, Montgomery goes to Sweeney and says, hey, look, I am playing some kids. It's Lauko and McLaughlin, and they're two reliable guys. I think to start the season out, they want some sort of stability. So that'd be my fourth line. Connor, what would your fourth line be?
Yeah, I feel like it's tough to almost dial up one set grouping, because I feel like the fourth line is the one that I think, as much as you envision the fourth line as just the hard-nosed checking unit, I feel like now in today's NHL, you can kind of augment that line to whatever identity you're looking to get. So it remains to be seen what exactly Montgomery's looking to get out of it. Are they going to be a shutdown line? Is Coyle in the top 6 going to be the shutdown line? Is the fourth line just going to be energy instead and just be a bunch of guys are just going to be toppling over players? So I'm going with the anticipation. They just want a heavy physical line. I feel like the Bruins, again, their identity, I think, is going to be based off of goaltending and defense. Offense firepower is not going to be there. Add a bunch of big guys, add a lot more heft, forechecking, being physical, grind things out is kind of how they're doing it. So I'm going with a very, heavy line there. Lucic, I think, is the obvious one at left wing. I'm going to go Greer to start on right wing. I think, again, it could be Boquist. I think he has a higher ceiling as well. It remains to be seen where exactly he best fits in, because I don't think his numbers at faceoffs are that good, though I could be mistaken there. But he's definitely a guy that I think will be fighting for those minutes. But if you're looking at just forechecking, speed, making things happen, Greer kind of fits that mold. And I'm going Patrick Brown down the middle. Again, he's not the headline stealer, but I think you look at what he brings. If you want some stability there in the middle, really, really good in faceoffs in his career. I think between his total amount of games, he was on pace for about 170 hits last year. So if he can be almost like a Chris Wagner type down the middle, just like physical, wins faceoffs, does his job that way, chips in every now and then, maybe that's all you're looking for on that fourth line. Like, that fourth line could change as year goes on. Like, Beecher could step in, and I think he has a higher ceiling as a 4C. McLaughlin makes plenty of sense. Lauko, again, if he's not on the third line, at the very least, he should be on the fourth line somewhere.
Yes.
So if you look at just how many guys they have in those roles, they can kind of change the line however they wanted to. Like, they could be a line that ends up being a higher offensive ceiling than what we've seen in years past if they slot younger players down there to kind of carve out roles. So it'll be fascinating, not just to see. Obviously, we still don't know what the lines are going to be and who the players are in the bottom six, but how that identity kind of maps out. Because if you asked me last year, the third line was going to be this shutdown line of Coyle, averaging 30% ozone starts with Taylor Hall and Trent Frederick, I would be like, that's not going to happen. Not just like the lines themselves, but what their role was. So how Montgomery opts to play that fourth line, I think is going to be fascinating in terms of the amount of different players, unique play styles, and how it all kind of comes together over the next month or so.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned how that role of that fourth line changes. Like, I was just kind of writing down off the top of my head, if they were to go with a more offensively minded fourth line, I guess you would go more Boquist, Merkulov, Steen potentially, even as like as a fourth line. I mean, Beecher isn't an offensive force, Brown isn't, McLaughlin, I mean, it's fine, but I don't think he matches the offensive ceiling of the three I first mentioned. So I guess that would be the three. It's also tough because, again, like, all of these guys, right, aside from Lysell, none of them have like an offensive ceiling that equates to, potentially being a top six forward someday. I mean, if things work out like that, awesome, but none really do. So, I mean, are you going to really look to your fourth line like as a line that you go to for a goal in the third period? Like, probably not. So I think, again, it kind of goes back to going to be a little heavier, a little more physical. Like, my fourth line kind of blends all of that with reliability and some of that, and yours is a little more heavy. But I do think that, I mean, again, like, the guys in the mix, the guys we mentioned, Greer as well, Farinacci, I'm curious to see, like, how does he look in camp? How does he look to start the year in Providence? Is that a guy who works his way up? And Merkulov, I mean, Merkulov led Providence in points last year and has a very high offensive ceiling. The question is, defensively, what is he going to look like? Can he sort of get his feet under him in the defensive zone? So I'm curious. I mean, again, I think these lines change throughout the year. I don't think they're going to stay the same. I think they're going to change throughout training camp. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the most interesting one, though, is Lysell. What does Lysell look so good in camp that they have to put him on the NHL roster? Or is it, hey, he needs a little more seasoning? So we will see. They're all questions we'll get answers to either in camp or throughout the season, hopefully. Conor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered as we finally get through the offseason. We'll have coverage over from captain's practices, see what a few players have to say there. Start again looking at preseason prep, training camp, roster battles, all that stuff in the weeks ahead. So read all of our stuff over at Boston.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.